Welcome to another session of Understanding Human Anatomy. In this video, I'm going to continue our discussion of portal circulation, and in particular I want to talk about the celiac trunk. Now, to start, I want to sketch in a little bit of aorta, and I'm going to just draw it squiggly down here to indicate that it's cut. And let me fill it in like so. And I'm going to draw in the celiac trunk right here. And remember, this is a very short vessel. It's going to divide into 3 other major arteries. Now, the next thing I want to do is sketch in outlines of the structures we're going to be talking about. And we're going to start over here with the stomach. And we'll put a little bit of esophagus in here. Then the fundus and the greater curvature of the stomach coming over like so. And with the lesser curvature narrowing down into the pylorus, and then becoming the duodenum, which makes a nice arc around like so. And then we'll draw a circle to indicate that it joins the jejunum. I'll clean this up a little bit. Now, I also want to draw in the pancreas. So we'll start up here with the head of the pancreas, move down around the body and the tail. Like so. And then I want to sketch in the spleen over here. And again, let me clean that drawing up a little bit. Like so. And let me add some labels. The celiac trunk. Draw an arrow to it. The stomach, the spleen, and the duodenum. And finally, the pancreas. Now, the celiac trunk divides into 3 arteries. The first is the left gastric artery. And the left gastric artery runs over to the stomach like so. It will give a branch up to the base of the esophagus here, and then the rest of the artery will continue on the lesser curvature of the stomach. Right. The splenic artery is a rather large artery that will pass posterior to the stomach and then continue on along the edge of the pancreas and come up to the spleen. Okay, it's called the splenic artery because it does supply the spleen. Now, the splenic artery gives off branches into the spleen itself, as one would guess from its name, but it also has branches coming over to the stomach. And the branches coming over to the stomach are the short gastric arteries. And then there is another branch that goes over to the greater curvature of the stomach and follows along the greater curvature. And as it does so, it gives off branches into the wall of the stomach to supply the stomach. Now, let's put some labels in here. And over here is the left gastric artery. And that's this one, and it runs along the lesser curvature of the stomach. Then we have the splenic artery, And the splenic artery is the one that runs on the dorsal body wall near the pancreas and winds up over at the spleen. We have some arteries here, actually several of them, called the short gastric arteries. And I'll draw some lines into those. And then we have the artery that's a branch of the splenic that runs along the greater curvature, and that one is the left gastroepiploic artery. I'll draw a line to it right here. Now we're going to find that the splenic artery will also give branches into the pancreas, especially the body and tail of the pancreas as it passes by. Now, the third artery to come from the celiac trunk is the hepatic artery. And the hepatic artery can sometimes be divided into the hepatic artery proper and the common hepatic artery. Now, the reason we call it common hepatic artery is that it will give off a rather significant branch, the gastroduodenal artery. And then the remainder continues on up to the liver as the hepatic artery. The gastroduodenal artery gives off several other branches, one running along the lesser curvature that comes to meet the left gastric artery. That would be the right gastric artery. So let me get some labels in here before it gets too confusing. And Then that will divide into the hepatic artery proper. And that is here. And the gastroduodenal artery, and one of the branches of the gastroduodenal artery will be the right gastric artery, and the right gastric artery running along the lesser curvature. Well, anatomo is end-to-end with the left gastric artery. I've left a little gap in the diagram, but that's so we can see the difference. Then we'll have a branch that runs along the greater curvature of the stomach, and again it's going to be sending branches into the stomach as we go, and this would be the right gastroepiploic artery, and like the gastric arteries on the lesser curvature, the gastroepiploic arteries along the greater curvature also meet end-to-end and anastomose. Again, I left the gap in there just to show you that it's two different arteries. Then going back to the gastroduodenal artery, it will divide into two. And one will go anterior to the duodenum and pancreas, and one will go posterior. And I'll indicate the posterior by using a lighter shade of pink. And these are the anterior and posterior superior pancreatico-duodenal arteries. So let me put the label in here. And I'll draw the lines in for the anterior and posterior superior pancreatico-duodenal arteries. Now, as the name implies, there is an anterior and posterior inferior pancreatico-duodenal arteries that will then supply also the head of the pancreas and the duodenum, and the superior and inferior arteries of the same names will anastomose end to end. And just to indicate what's going on here, we can draw branches going over to the duodenum and over to the pancreas. As we'll see with these ones on the posterior side as well. So this is the celiac trunk and its three major branches: left gastric artery, splenic artery, and hepatic artery. The left gastric artery will supply the terminal portion of the esophagus, and it will form the left gastric artery that runs along the lesser curvature. The splenic artery will run over and supply the spleen. It'll give rise to the short gastric arteries, which supply mostly the fundus of the stomach, and the left gastroepiploic artery, which runs along the greater curvature of the stomach. Then the hepatic artery will divide into the hepatic artery proper and the gastroduodenal artery. The gastroduodenal artery giving rise to the right gastric artery, which runs along the lesser curvature of the stomach, and the right gastroepiploic artery, which runs along the greater curvature of the stomach. And then it will come down to form the anterior and posterior superior pancreatico-duodenal artery. There's one more artery that I almost forgot, and that is a branch of the hepatic artery proper here. And this is the artery going to the gallbladder. It is the cystic artery. That concludes our discussion of the celiac trunk. In the next video, we'll talk about the superior and inferior mesenteric arteries. Thank you for your attention.